actual waves almost pushing along there. That's the storm surge coming in. And then as the system moves away, you will get a return flow and the water will push back the other way. So along the west coast, as the system is making its way up the coast, we're not going to see the storm surge right at the beginning because the winds will be coming in from the land. But as the storm moves up and past the southwestern part of Florida, that return flow, that counterclockwise flow, that will bring the storm surge into the southwest. So for the eastern part of the state, it's as the storm makes its way up, and you can see, you just follow the radar, follow the loop. You can see that rain coming in. Well, that's the storm surge. That's the way the storm surge will come in. And as that system lifts up to the north, on the backside of that, it'll be the western coast that gets the storm surge. So as it moves up, that's where you'll see ahead of the storm on the east coast, you'll see storm surge. But on the west coast, we'll see more of the storm surge as the system starts to make its way, run parallel, and then goes to the north, Savannah.
A second ago, you said that this water comes in at about the same speed that the hurricane's moving. You said about 8 miles per hour. A day or so ago, that thing was moving at about 13, 14 miles an hour. Do you expect it to continue to slow down or pick up speed?
Well, generally speaking, it starts to speed up once it gets on land. But right now, we don't see much of a pickup in speed. I think it'll remain between 8 to 9, maybe 10 miles per hour at most.
We got Lester and Al there in Tampa, and in the moment, things are fairly peaceful there, but that is not for long. That's where it's headed. And
guys, thank you
a lot. Thank you so much. Our coverage of Hurricane Irma as it's making landfall in Florida and the Keys, as we see it battering southeastern Florida. We see the signs of it in western Florida. We'll stay on it. Our correspondents are all over that region. Our live coverage continues. in our live.
Six to 8 inches of water in them.
Oh, let's listen and see if we hear him.
Roll on through a Sunday morning here on the East Coast, and here on the East Coast of Florida, we're getting battered by Hurricane Irma, and we have a long way to go. These winds here are running 40 to 50 miles an hour. We've already had a gust up the coast at Deerfield Beach in Broward County of 75 miles an hour. So that's hurricane force right there. The rain is stinging, and what you see in front of me is what happens when it rains too much and the drainage system can't handle it. Power is on down here, but about 15% of residents in Miami-Dade have lost power based on the numbers from Florida Power and Light. The other concern is surge. Now, we have backed off on the surge numbers here because the track has changed. A couple days ago, we thought it would be up to 10 feet. Now we've cut it back to 5. And in the next hour or so, when we get daylight, we'll go over about 30, 40 yards from here to the Miami River as it goes into downtown Miami. We'll show you the wave heights and the white caps and just how nasty it is out on the water here. There's also the tornado threat. We've got a torque on of 8, meaning there's an 80% chance of a tornado within 50% of a point. That's going to be the same all day. The current watch goes till noon for the southern part of Florida.
Why don't we do this as we continue to watch what's happening around Mike Seidel in Miami? Let's tell you the very latest on this storm. It's packing quite a punch. It's slamming southern Florida. Right now, it is a massive Category 4 storm with 130-mile-per-hour winds.
As expected, power outages are widespread this morning, growing by the hour. Nearly 400,000 customers across the state of Florida have the lights out.
In all, this is a huge number. More than 7 million people have evacuated in the states of Florida and Georgia, and hundreds of shelters are open. But we have word from a lot of those shelters that they are nearing capacity.
That's right. We've got complete coverage this morning. We are all over this region. And let's start with NBC's national correspondent, Miguel Almaguer. He's in Florida City. This is south of Miami, a little further inland. Miguel, good morning.
Savannah, good morning. We continue to get pelted with sideways rain for the last 12 plus hours here, but I got to tell you, the big concern out here remains those powerful winds. We continue to get surges on and off. At times, it is even difficult to stand outside. We know overnight, as we were inside the building here inside the City Hall and inside the police department, they lost power several times. There were power surges. You could hear the building beginning to slowly come apart. For the most part, though, it remains intact. They have shutters over the windows. It is an eerie feeling being inside, not being able to look outside, but being able to hear what is the hurricane bearing down on this area. The winds here continue to pick up this morning as we continue to get later on into the day. First responders tell us in these conditions they simply will not go outside. It is much too dangerous for them, and this is the reason why these winds are blowing just about everything over. We've seen transformers explode here over the last several hours, and back behind me you'll see these trees are beginning to also bend over sideways. There's power poles and power lines that are also beginning to sag. That'll be a concern for first responders who are going out to check this area down power lines. They say the conditions here will only deteriorate more. The mayor has told us not everyone, most folks in this city did not evacuate. He says they are hurricane hardened and they are likely hunkering down at home. We have seen a few cars out here driving for the most part, but at this hour it does remain a fairly precarious situation out here, guys.
All right, Miguel Almaguer in Florida City. Miguel, thank you very much.
Not far from Miguel is Gotti Schwartz. He's been spending the morning driving around this southern Florida city in the storm, and now he's out of the car and in the thick of it. Gotti, good morning.
Yeah, that's right, Savannah. We got out of the car and we took some refuge underneath this bridge right here because down the road there were some transformers that were blowing. I don't know if you can see, but we're flickering lights down there. That's where the electric grid is starting to fail. You've got one side of the street that still has electricity. You've got the other side of the street where it comes off, and there are some transformers down there that keep throwing out a tremendous amount of sparks. I kind of want to show you where we're at and what the wind's doing. So this over here This over here has been blowing palm fronds into the street, and this is the US 1. Down that way is the Florida Keys. We're headed that way at some point this morning. We want to check on the 1 to make sure that there is still a passageway into the Keys. That's what emergency crews are going to be using to get a lot of that aid down into Key West and into Key Largo. But right now you see the winds keep hammering us. They let up, then they hammer, then they let up, then they hammer. We're expecting these to become more sustained over the next 3, 4, 5 hours. And right now, we were just talking to some of the people in Key Largo. They were saying that this is what they're also seeing. They were expected to see it throughout the night. So we're going to be checking back with them in just a bit. Savannah, back to you.
Yeah, the Keys are really getting it. Gotti in Florida City, which is south of Miami, a little bit further inland, but the Keys are getting it right now as well.
And now over on the other coast and much further north is Tampa, and they're beginning to feel the first effects of this storm. The Coast Guard has now closed ports there. The airport shutting down last night, and that's where we find NBC Nightly News anchor Lester Holt this morning. Lester, good morning again.
Good morning, Matt. They are battening down the hatches here, watching what is coming toward them. It'll be Monday before this city feels the full effect of the hurricane. But as Al has pointed out, it is remaining just a little offshore, so it will have a lot of strength as it comes through here. We drove over from Miami yesterday to Fort Myers. Talked to people there who were a bit caught off guard. They were, in many cases, preparing to help out the east coast of Florida, only to find themselves defending their own homes right now. Al Roker joins us again. You've been tracking this thing right now. It's going just as forecast.
And what we talked about was the fact that this is going to be so large that it was going to be affecting both sides of the state. And you can see right now, Miami is getting hammered, and we're starting to see the Keys getting hammered as well. And right now, it is only 15 miles. Irma is only 15 miles from Key West, and once it passes Key West, it will mark the first time 2 Category 4 storms have struck the United States in the same season. We've never had that before. 130-mile-per-hour winds. It's moving northwest at 8 miles per hour. Here are the effects, what to expect. Key West right now, up to 125-mile-per-hour winds, storm surge 5 to 10 feet. And we also look at what's going on in Miami and the southeastern part of the state. We're going to be looking at winds of 50 to 75 miles per hour. That storm surge 3 to 5 feet, and it's just going to continue to grow as the afternoon moves on. As we continue into the afternoon and evening hours, midday, Naples, Fort Myers, 100 to 125 mile per hour winds. Big storm surge there, 10 to 15 feet, and with the strong winds, it's just going to get even worse as we move up into past Sarasota and Tampa. That's late tonight in the Tampa Bay area, up to 100-mile-per-hour winds, a 5 to 8 foot storm surge, and then as we move into the Panhandle, we're going to see those winds and rain continue. We look for Jacksonville, a storm surge of 4 to 6 feet on the eastern side, and in Tallahassee, you're going to have heavy rain, heavy thunderstorms, strong winds, and it continues on up into parts of Georgia as well. The winds are going to continue to howl, sustained winds of upwards of 70, 100 miles per hour in the Keys all the way to Miami. And as we move forward, you're going to see wind gusts off and on that will be between tropical force and hurricane force winds as this makes its way into Monday and Tuesday. We'll still be talking about this. Really, the system will last into the end of this week coming up. And the storm surge, again, that's where the most deaths and most damage occur, anywhere from 5 to 15 feet, depending on where you are. And it goes all the way up to the Georgia-South Carolina border, Lester. And again, even we were worried about Miami with all the cranes. We're standing across from 2 cranes over here, 2 construction cranes. And that's one of those things I know they've got to be very, very concerned about.
I have to ask you, the images of Harvey and Beaumont in Houston are still fresh, 50 inches of rain. Will this be a rain event on that kind of a scale?
No, this is moving relatively quickly. Harvey, it just stopped and just kept dumping rain. This will be anywhere from 20 to 25 inches for the Keys, 10 to 15 inches generally, but upwards of 20 inches in some spots. But sandy soil hopefully drains out pretty quickly.
All right, Al, thanks very much. Let's send it back to New York now. Matt and Savannah.
Lester and Al, thank you so much. Florida's Governor Rick Scott has said this is the most catastrophic storm his state has ever seen, and he sounded the alarm all week for people to get out of its way. And Governor Scott is with us now. Governor, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning. Well, it's starting to hit us. I talked to a friend in the Keys this morning, and they're getting pounded there. It's going to go up my hometown, Naples, Florida, and all up the West Coast. What's really scary is the storm surge. We've prepared all week, although there's always something else you can do. My job is to protect everybody. I'm going to do everything I can, spare no resource to make sure everybody's as safe as possible.
You think the West Coast was as ready as they should have been, considering I think a lot of folks thought this was headed to the East Coast of your state?
Well, I talked all week about don't be complacent on the West Coast because you never know where these things are going to go. We have now over 400 shelters open. People are, I looked at all the traffic cameras this morning. People are off the roads. I think they're hunkering down now. They've gotten to our shelters. I know there's a lot of people around the world, around the country that want to help us. You can text 202-20222 and make a $10 donation. We still need volunteers. You can go to volunteerflorida.org. But I can tell you what, people are resilient here. They're strong. And the most important thing we have is not our beaches or our amusement park. It's our people. We have wonderful people here that are working together.
You say you've been looking at the traffic cameras. I don't know if you've had a chance, Governor, to take a look at some of the cameras out of Miami right now. We've been looking in on Mike Seidel on the Weather Channel, and that city right now is getting absolutely buffeted by high winds and some heavy rains. Over on the other coast, I want to mention, you mentioned, your home near Naples. You're in that area where Al is talking about that 10-foot storm surge, right where I guess you've moved your family, gotten them up to Tallahassee, where you are, but your neighborhood in Naples is going to take a lot of the brunt of this.
Oh, it's going to be horrible. I looked at some cameras this morning, and the waves are already up in the Naples beach. It's going to be 10 to 15 feet above ground level. I mean, that's going to be devastating. We've worked to get everybody to evacuate. I hope everybody has. You've got to hunker down now. Yeah, we need everybody's prayers. But we're a resilient state, and we're going to take care of everybody. We're going to spare no expense. The federal government's here, the state government's here, local government's here. We're going to do everything we can. We've got great first responders. We're going to do everything we can to take care of everybody.
Governor, as a guy who lives in Naples, walk us through what 10 feet of water might mean to that city area.
Well, if you go along the beach area, the typical house that's been there for any period of time is typically about 11 feet above mean high tide. It doesn't really matter anymore, though, because it's above what they're saying is 10 to 15 feet above the ground level. What everybody thought was, well, that's not bad because it's based on high tide. It's not. It's above ground level. So, and it's a pretty flat town. The question is going to be is how far it goes in, but it's going to be devastating to all those homes on the beaches. The question is going to be how far inland it goes. So my goal all week has been that people evacuate. If you're in an evacuation zone, get out. We have got good emergency management people around the state. But now we've got to hunker down. We've got to watch out for each other. We've got to pray for each other. And I know people will.
Yeah. And we think back, of course, there have been so many storms that your state has dealt with. Hurricane Andrew still looms large. Do you fear that this storm could be worse in terms of its damage?
Well, if you look at the size of it, it's so much bigger than Andrew. I was in the hospital business back when Andrew hit. I evacuated hospitals. I had a hospital completely demolished. We had to hand-bank patients. It looks like on the East Coast we're not going to get the same storm surge, but they're getting buffeted by all the winds. I mean, 130-mile-an-hour winds is devastating to our state, but this is going to impact our whole state, and now it looks like it's going to impact the Panhandle. So it's what we've talked about all week. Don't anybody in the state be complacent. But it's going to hit all the way up to Tampa, all the way up to even Tallahassee, where the capital is.
And you mentioned that, and that's one of the problems, too. Because it's going to go south to north throughout most of your state, all those responders, all those FEMA resources are staged north of here, and they've got to wait until that storm goes completely through, until they can start making their way on whatever's left of the roadways down to the south, where people need that stuff.
It's FEMA, it's our utilities, it's moving water and food, all those things. You've got to wait until it passes. So I do daily phone calls with all of our utilities, try to get as many assets down. They've already committed from out of state, 23,000 people are coming down to help get our power back on. We're going to lose a lot of power. We do have a lot of resources already in Orlando. So as it passes Orlando, we'll be able to get those trucks on the road and get them south. But it's going to take a while. That's why we've said all week, 3 days of water, 3 days of food. Understand that we're going to do everything we can to help you. We've got to save everybody first. Then we'll be able to do everything we can to make your life more convenient, because it's going to be inconvenient. It's inconvenient to be at a friend's house or at a shelter. But if you think what I'm worried about the most, it's a storm surge. We've never had it. I mean, it's nothing. Andrew didn't have the storm surge like this. 10 to 15 feet above ground level, even 5 or 6 feet. It's hard to believe anybody will survive that. If it comes through your house and just flushes in and flushes out. And that's going to be very difficult to survive.
Well, Governor, we hope people heeded your warnings. They've been repeated all week long. Governor, good morning. Thank you so much for being with us, and keep in touch, would you?
Okay. Good morning.
Thanks.
Governor Scott mentioned Naples. Let's take a look there now. Kerry Sanders is in the city of Naples. What's it like there now, Kerry?
Well, guys, I'm just a short distance from the governor's residence. We've only had some strong gusts and the consistent rain. One gust was clocked at 65 miles per hour. So the real threat here is one of also timing. The governor was just talking about storm surge of 10 to 15 feet. If the timing of Irma is what we think it's going to be off of Naples, the high tide here at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon is going to add to the problem, which is going to cause that storm surge to be higher. And so to give you an idea, 10 to 15 feet, just consider this. South of here in Everglades City, which is a community, mostly fishing village, very popular for tourists to go to, the homes are up on stilts about 10 feet up. So the storm surge means that if you're in a home there, and that place is a ghost town, everybody's gone, there'd still be 5 feet of water in the house. And the storm surge is very violent. The amount of water that comes in, it's not something that anybody could perhaps swim in. Certainly you can't stand in it. It's got all sorts of debris in it, so it would hit you, perhaps kill you even before you drown. So the real threat here, beyond the wind, we already see some trees down from the gusts, is going to be that storm surge. And that's why this community and the counties along the coast here have urged so many people to move inland to the shelters. And, of course, the shelters are at capacity. Interesting, because the shelters are at capacity and some people were so anxious about trying to go somewhere that they kind of played the system, dialed 911 last night, and the reports are that when they dialed 911, they said they needed to go to the hospital. And so EMS was taking them to the hospital, and the hospitals are not shelters. But nobody's going to be turned away until the winds hit a consistent 45 miles an hour. And once the winds are at 45 miles an hour, dialing 911 will do you no good. Nobody's coming to you, guys.
Yeah, that's true. Kerry, thank you very much. Just a short time ago, Irma's northern eye wall reached lower Florida Keys, or the lower Florida Keys. Captain Corey Bryan is with the Monroe County Sheriff's Department. He's on Isla Mirada. Captain Bryan, good morning. And let me just say that it's very difficult for us to get any of our broadcasting resources down there. So to try to be the eyes and ears for our viewers, what's going on?
Well, right now, everything's pretty good. We're experiencing like 90-mile-an-hour winds. We're in a Category 5 building. Gotti was down here yesterday. We spoke to him real quick, but so far, everything's good. Our building is holding up without any issues. We've got a little bit of water leakage at the windows and stuff, but for the most part, everything is really good right now. Well, we do have some strong winds still, and the rain is it's picking up. But the storm surge, I got to be honest with you, we're not really able to tell, but from what we're understanding, it's only going to be 3 to 6 feet is what we're hoping for.
And did you get most of the residents out, or are there folks that are staying and trying to weather it?
We did get most of the people out. I think we did a quick count the other night. It was about 700 people. And we've got Shelter of Last Resort up here, and I believe there's like 29 to 30 people that were staying there.
Captain, have you been through a lot of storms in the past in the Keys, and how would this compare so far?
I have. Actually, I have. I've been here for 31 years, and this is actually the worst one. I told my wife this morning that, being here and everything through all these, this is, I've never really had to shelter in place like this, and I got to tell you, the winds are just, they're unbelievable. But again, the building that we're in, you wouldn't even really know that you're in a storm by sitting in here.
Is there any view out of that building, or are you just kind of hunkered down so much that you can't see?
You know, what we've done is we sent a couple guys out this morning just to check for damage and stuff, and that's when we realized that we had a couple leaks at the windows in our vestibule area, but checked to make sure the antennas were still up and everything. All of our lights are still up. We've got just some debris like trees and limbs down, but the building is in very good state.
I hope it stays that way, Captain. We really appreciate your time on what I know is a really busy morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Let's go to Dylan. She's been all over the state over this weekend, and she was in Palm Beach 24 hours ago. Now she's in Tampa. She went to Tampa. Now she's in Sarasota because that's where the storm seems to be headed, Dylan.
It certainly does, and it's not really going to get bad here for another several hours. So we are under a mandatory evacuation for coastal areas in Sarasota County, and there are still a few more hours left to kind of clear out from the coastal areas. Looking just beyond that building, that's where the barrier islands are located. There are 6 barrier islands. They were all under a mandatory evacuation. Keep in mind, the barrier islands are there and protect the mainland from these big storms, but the barrier islands are so developed and there's so much tourism on those islands that area faces a huge danger from the storm surge because it is designed to protect the mainland. So the way the storm surge works, as the storm makes its way up the west coast of Florida, it pushes all of this water on shore and it moves forward at the rate that the hurricane moves forward. So in this case, it's about 8 miles per hour. So it moves in very, very quickly, and we could see a 6 to 10 foot storm surge here in the Sarasota area. And again, that water rises very quickly in just a few short minutes. So it is a very important to evacuate these coastal areas before the storm moves in, which is going to be closer to about 9-10 o'clock tonight. Guys?
All right, Dylan, and it's the water, but also the debris that gets swept into that water that can be very, very dangerous. Let's go to Key West Mayor Craig Cates. He's on the phone with us. He is literally in the eye of the storm right now as it hits the Keys. Mayor, good morning. Just give us a report of what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and what you're experiencing.
Well, we're in the eye wall right now, and I don't know what the winds are, but they're forecast it could be gusting to 150. Obviously, it's unbelievable, but there's not much water here where we're at, and maybe on the other part of the island there might be some water, but everybody's, hunkered down, and hopefully everyone is in their shelters and strong houses, and I'm praying for everybody to come through this safely. But we're right in the middle of it right now.
Mr. Mayor, people have to understand just how vulnerable those keys are. Key West, we've spent a lot of time down there. From side to side, width-wise, how wide is Key West?
2 by 4 miles, depends on what direction you go.
So,
East and west is about 4 miles, north and south, about 2.
Is there a fear that water coming from one side actually just gets through and kind of makes its way across?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, not all the way across. The way the storm is coming, the wind wouldn't come, the water wouldn't come all the way across. Obviously, anything that's right on the water is very, very vulnerable, and hopefully nobody is in a boat or a marina or a house on the water. Hopefully all got inland as much as possible, just staying there or in a strong building.
Mr. Mayor, how does this storm compare to others you may have experienced there?
Well, there's quite a few. Obviously, this is the worst hurricane that's ever hit Key West, I think, or right up there with it, but so far, I see a lot of the buildings I can see are doing well. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of damage when we get out there, but, everybody's boarded up and all, and we're doing the best we can and hoping for the best here.
Mr. Mayor, the people of Key West are individuals. I think that's the best way to put it. They take pride in the fact that they've been there, done that, and seen just about everything. Was it difficult to get people into the frame of mind where they would get in their cars a couple of days ago and simply get out?
Well, I think the vast majority did evacuate, and some waited till the last minute and evacuated, the night before the storm was supposed to hit. So when they seen how bad it was going to be. That being said, there is a few that stayed, and obviously some of the government and the first responders and all, we stayed, and to be able to be prepared and get this place up and running and help anybody that needs help after the storm. So that being said, I hope there are ones that stayed are in safe places, and we'll see what see what damage is done.
Key West Mayor Craig Cates, sir, thank you so much for your time this morning, and it bears repeating. He's in Key West. That is where the eye wall is as we speak.
Right.
He's in it. He's experiencing it, but we hope that most of the residents there heeded the warnings and got out.
Absolutely. We're going to have an awful lot more of our special coverage of Hurricane Irma just ahead on this Sunday morning. But first, a look at these messages. We're back now, 7:30 on this Sunday morning. It's the 10th of September, 2017. And this is a Sunday morning when Florida is feeling the full force of Hurricane Irma. High winds, heavy rain conditions are only going to get worse as this storm moves to the north. And we're looking at a video right there. Those are images from Miami, which is on the better, if there is one, better side of this storm.
Not even at the center of the storm. Actually, Irma is right on top of the Florida Keys right now. The eye reaching there in the last hour. Sustained maximum winds, 130 miles an hour. This is a major Category 4 storm. We're going to get a new update on its projected path at the top of this hour. And to go with the wind and the rain, the storm surge is the story. That is a huge problem associated with this storm. They're saying it could be as high as 15 feet in some places.
Already, the storm has led to the largest evacuation in Florida's history. More than 6 million people there. Hundreds of thousands more told to flee in parts of Georgia. Shelters in both states are filled to capacity.
Let's start this half hour with NBC's Miguel Almaguer. He's in Florida City, that's south of Miami, and things have gotten worse over the morning for him. Miguel, good morning.
Hey, Savannah and Matt, good morning to you guys both. The conditions here continue to deteriorate over the last several hours here. This is downtown Florida City. For the most part, it is a ghost town. We're just about 8 miles inland, so they say the storm surge here is not a huge concern, though it is something they worry about. Really, this is a rain and wind event here. Over the last several hours here, the rain has gotten really bad. I want to show you these palm trees. They've been bending in the wind over the last several hours. So have the power lines across this region. It's an issue everywhere here. They're worried about losing power. As I bring you back down the street here, you'll see this is the only vehicle we've seen out here over the last some time, a police cruiser, a lone police cruiser, kind of doing patrols in this area. They tell us they are not responding to emergency calls because it's simply going to become too dangerous, potentially catastrophic for first responders to go out. Over the last several hours, we've seen transformers explode here. The trees are blowing in the wind. The power lines are beginning to sag. So the situation here is certainly becoming much more precarious. We're not far from the Keys, where Gotti Schwartz has been reporting from earlier this morning. He's been feeling the brunt of the storm and certainly working its way towards here. First responders tell us that most of this city, about 80% of the residents here have remained here. They say they are hurricane hardened, but they are going to have to certainly batten down the hatches now. That's too dangerous to go anywhere. So folks are going to have to ride out the storm in this area, guys. Back to you.
Yeah, Miguel, we've seen it get worse for you as the morning has gone on and for all the folks there in Florida City.
Let's go diagonally across the state to the north and west now to Tampa, Florida, where Lester Holt is standing by because that's where this thing is all headed. Lester.
You bet, Matt. 1921, the last time Tampa was hit by a major hurricane. They have some evacuation orders in place. They're closing bridges, essentially battening down the hatches. I want to show you a quick picture just across the river here from us. A couple of cranes. These are the things they'll be looking for here in other big cities across Florida as those winds begin to pick up. They're only about 18 miles an hour now. We're, of course, a bit farther north of the storm, watching it coming at us, so they have a little more prep time here, but it is going to hit here, and Al Roker, it's going to hit as a sizable hurricane.
That's right. And to give you a sense of how big this is and how powerful and how long it's going to stay a tropical entity, the city of Atlanta was just issued a tropical storm warning. Atlanta, because they expect this to stay a tropical entity into Tuesday and Wednesday. First time they've ever had a tropical warning since they started issuing them inland since 2000. Here you can see right now the regeneration of that eye. It is about 10 miles from Key West. You watched, we told you last half hour, you see that double eye and then it dropped out and now the eye has reformed. 130 mile per hour winds. It's moving northwest at 8 miles per hour. This thing is going to rewrite history books when it's all said and done. Let's track it for you and show you what we're looking at. It'll be right around Fort Myers around 2 this afternoon with 130 mile per hour winds and a massive 10 to 15 foot storm surge. Overnight tonight here in Tampa, 115 mile per hour winds and up to a 10-foot storm surge. And as we continue up through the Panhandle, Tallahassee around Monday, Tuesday 1 a.m., it's gets into Georgia with 45-mile-per-hour winds and continues on into Thursday as we get up into Kentucky with strong winds and heavy, heavy rain. We've also got a tornado watch in effect. We're watching that. That's through the afternoon and on into the evening hours. As the system pushes north, we have the risk of strong storms and tornadoes out of this thing. And, of course, the storm surge. All that water being pushed in to the land by the wind from southwest Florida to 10 to 15 feet, the Keys up to 10 feet, Miami Beach 1 to 2 feet. We've already seen 2 to 3 foot surges, so we may have to up that as we go on during the day. And then as we get up to the coast, Georgia, South Carolina, 4 to 6 feet, northwestern Florida, a 4 to 6 foot storm surge as well. Rainfall amounts. The Keys will see upwards of 25 inches of rain. The Florida Peninsula generally about 8 to 15 inches. We could be looking at 20 inches. And as we said, the eastern Florida Panhandle may pick up to 10 inches of rain. And Lester, the science of this is really kind of fascinating as well. I've heard about this effect. I've never seen it. We've got some video. This is down in Long Island in the Bahamas. Because of the intense low pressure, water is sucked up into the hurricane. Look at what happens. The ocean is literally sucked dry.
Goodness, I've never seen that.
There is no water. It is now, in 24 hours, replenished itself. But because of the combination of winds being pushed away from the shore and the sucking section of motion of the low pressure, it literally drained the ocean all around the island.
That is incredible. You and I were speaking of something else yesterday. This hurricane is fed by warm water.
Right.
I don't think, folks, I certainly didn't appreciate how warm. We're talking bath water.
It's bath water. The water between Cuba and the Florida Straits is about 85 to 90 degrees. And sometimes it's kind of a shallow layer. This thing goes down way, way lower than it normally does. So when you have a storm come over, you have what's called upwelling. It draws up water from the lower levels. Well, usually that draws up cooler air, cooler water, and that cools the water down and cuts off the energy source. This thing keeps drawing up from underneath.
That video
very,
shows
very
incredible.
warm water.
That's just, I've never seen anything quite like that. All right, Al, we'll, of course, be checking with you as we continue to ride this thing out. It's not here yet. It'll be a while for Tampa.
We've got another couple hours before we get into the soup again.
But it's coming this way. Matt and Savannah.
All right, Lester, Al, thank you very much.
Well, let's go over to Washington now. NBC's Tom Costello is spending his morning at FEMA's headquarters. He's got some new information on the storm and the response. Tom, good morning again.
Good morning. So this is the FEMA Command Center. Among their many concerns here is that millions could be without power depending on where the storm slices through the state. So FEMA, coordinating with the state authorities, have already set up what they call pods, points of distribution centers across the state. And for example, they have a big center just outside of Orlando in Groveland, Florida. But also they're positioning resources outside of the state and outside of the zone. Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama is a major staging zone. Also, North Carolina and Georgia. One of their many concerns here is the number of people in the storm zone who may not have evacuated and who are elderly, who may not be able to get out, who may not be mobile, who may have medical issues or Alzheimer's, and how many of those people hunkered down and stayed in their homes. That's going to be a priority, coordinating with the state authorities to try to check on those people as soon as the storm, in fact, clears. Among those concerns, or among the resources that they're working on, is ensuring that they have search and rescue capabilities ready to go, food and water and generators and cots, and if necessary, tents, all of that pre-positioned outside of the state. And as you know, they told people if you're hunkering down, or for that matter, if you are going to a shelter, you need 3 days of medications with you at least. If you're going to stay in your home, even though they may have suggested against it, 3 days of food and water. So the question is, how long will people be cut off from their food, from water, and also potentially roads washed out and electricity being out? Those are all of the issues that they're dealing with right here at the FEMA Command Center in Washington. Guys, back to you.
Tom, thanks very much. We talked about this on Friday. If you've ever covered these storms, it's actually really impressive when those pre-positioned resources get rolling and you start to see highways where heading into the storm zone, just truck after crane after power truck, just in a line, sometimes 200, 300, 400 vehicles in a row, heading in to try to start the work of recovery.
They're waiting for that moment. Storm passes, they come in, and let's not forget what they've been dealing with in Southeast Texas with the response to Harvey. So good on them for sure.
NBC's Kerry Sanders in Naples, Florida. Kerry, getting any of the effects yet?
Well, we're starting to get the wind. You know, you can see the Gulf of Mexico behind me. It hasn't started roiling yet, but we know by this afternoon it's going to be a different story. As we come underneath the pier here, and you can see up, it's about 10 feet here. So consider that it could actually be a 15-foot storm surge, and one of the ways it will be measured is by the U.S. Geological Survey, and you can see they say do not disturb. They have a storm surge sensor in this location, so they'll be able to determine ultimately how the storm rose and how quickly it came. When a storm surge comes, it usually comes really quickly. So the problem is we're looking at a possible bad confluence of events, of a high tide at around 4 o'clock, Irma maybe being here around 2 o'clock. It's the backside of Irma that will cause the storm surge to come up here along the beach. You can see some beautiful homes right there on the beach. Some of the other homes are sort of concealed by the foliage here, but that storm surge will come in, and that's why all of the homes here, several blocks in, have been evacuated. Among those homes, we should note, is the governor of the state of Florida has a home right here, and those people who have evacuated have gone to storm shelters which have reached capacity. And so here in Naples and Collier County, there was no more room at the inn. In fact, they started telling people, look, we can now no longer accommodate you. If you see a home that's inland and you see storm shutters up, see if you can knock on the door last night, and maybe the strangers will let strangers in because there's just no more room in the shelters, guys.
All right, Kerry, and you look at where he's standing right now. If they get the storm surge they're talking about, that place will be underwater. Kerry, thank you. We have some video. A lot of our video we're getting from the Keys right now actually comes from social media because it's just so difficult to get broadcast resources there. But here's Key Biscayne, and you can see they are getting those winds, those rains, conditions worsening, and the eye wall making landfall over the Keys right now.
And you wonder if the people taking those images, capturing those images, wish they had gotten out of that area because it looks a little bit gnarly. Otis Wallace is joining us again. He is the mayor of Florida City. Mayor Wallace, good to talk to you again. So far, the most dramatic video we've seen of the morning has come from Miami as a band of this storm whipped through there. That's just to your north. What's it like in Florida City?
Well, in Florida City, it looks like it's settling down a bit. I hope that's going to be on a permanent basis. But just when you think it's settled down, that it comes roaring through again. But it looks like, from what I can see, we appear to be in pretty good shape. I'm about to get out, weather permitting, and do a survey of the damage and see just what my city looks like. But right now, it's just been dicey trying to get out because the winds come roaring back, and it can be very dangerous. You drop a dime, and all of a sudden, it's roaring again.
Yeah, I want to mention, just for our viewers at home, we've been watching some video of a seaside community. That is not Florida City. You're further inland, so storm surge is not the biggest problem for you, but wind damage. Is there power in your community?
There is some power, not a lot. Most of it's gone down. We don't appear, from what I've seen so far, to have a big problem with water or flooding, but power is definitely an issue. A lot of power lines down and that sort of thing. But structurally, from what I can see from my vantage point right now, I'm elevated right now. It looks like the buildings are holding up pretty well, certainly a lot better than they did with Andrew.
We've been seeing our correspondents who are actually in your town right now, and there's been a bit of a light show, lightning, it appears, transponders blowing, and as they tell it, most of your residents decided to stay because, as we mentioned, you are somewhat inland.
Yes, most of them did, and but they did seem to board up and shutter their homes really well. They did the best you can do deciding to stay, and looks like it might pay off for them. That, along with the westerly flow of the storm, those factors put together, we may just be okay.
We certainly hope so. Florida City Mayor Otis Wallace, careful as you get back into it, and keep us posted, sir. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
No problem. Keep people posted. Thanks. Bye-bye.
As Irma's destructive rains and winds pick up, the storm has also spawned several tornadoes and some water spouts across Florida. NBC's Jolene Kent's in Fort Lauderdale with the latest on conditions there. Joe, good morning.
Hey, Matt, good morning. We are currently under a tornado watch here in Broward County. As you can see behind me, the streets are entirely empty. That's not only because of the tornado watch, but because of the evacuation orders here in the Fort Lauderdale area. Even though we are no longer in the eye of the storm or in the path of the eye of the storm, what we are now feeling are some very significant wind and rain bands coming in this way. And police officers are actually now going off of the roads. They will not be able to respond to emergency calls, 911 calls, because these wind gusts are really picking up. About 100,000 people, Matt and Savannah, have no power in Broward County, 200,000 people in Miami-Dade. And I want to go back to the wind that we're feeling. This has caused a lot of folks here to seek shelter. Red Cross shelters that we have visited are completely full. And a lot of those residents are certainly not celebrating the fact that they're not in the eye of the storm, because what we're starting to feel is this intensity. And they've been through these hurricanes before, and they say they're just glad that they were able to prepare earlier, unlike some of their West Coast, Gulf Coast counterparts here. So, Matt and Savannah, the wind and rain really picking up here in Fort Lauderdale. Major power issues, and the band of this Hurricane Irma is certainly very strong, not going anywhere fast.
Okay, Joe, who's in Fort Lauderdale, thank you so much. And Dave Price, our meteorologist, has just been telling us there's a tornado warning now.
He handed me his phone, that's right, and it shows this tornado warning that really covers, I guess, Miami Beach and then kind of goes in a northwesterly direction up through Sunrise, Florida. So a pretty wide area where they're now looking out and telling people be careful that there could be tornadoes in your area.
And one of our correspondents is there. NBC's Mariana Atencio is in Miami Beach as we speak. Good morning to you. What's it like there?
Savannah, Matt, you can just see the wrath of Hurricane Irma, and this storm isn't even here yet. The beach is about a mile to my left, and you can just see how the wind is picking up incredibly fast. That storm surge is the biggest threat here to Miami Beach, but already you're seeing signs that have been toppled, trees that have been toppled. I'm walking alongside the iconic Ocean Drive, Collins Avenue, a street that is usually bustling with tourists and people. It is a ghost town right now, very dangerous. We've just spoken to the Miami Beach commissioner, who also tells us that 95% of the power lines in this city are above ground. We've also seen those flickering power lines that are down. 60% of the power grid in Miami Beach is down at the moment. And again, this is a barrier island, a coastal city. So with a hurricane the size of Irma, 400 miles wide, even if it's not a direct hit, you're going to feel it either way, and you're going to feel it pretty soon. The next couple of hours are crucial, and first responders tell us that they cannot be out in the street controlling the situation any longer because these winds have been picking up incredibly fast. So something else that they're concerned about is that because Miami Beach isn't getting a direct hit, people might think, they're out of the woods, they're going to be out and about, they're going to be driving around. That is not what first responders want to see. Still, incredibly dangerous storms. You have hurricane-strength winds that can blow up to 100 miles per hour, and just seeing it hit by the minute, worse than by the minute. Everybody should be hunkered down and taking shelter right now. Matt and Savannah?
And Mariana, we'll see for you as well, because it's obviously the wind's really picking up. Our correspondent there in Miami Beach, where they're under a tornado warning right now, or watch.
Here's the aforementioned Dave Price,
yes,
our meteorologist, standing by this morning just talking about that tornado warning. But what we're seeing time and time again here with Mariana there and others in Miami Beach, Mike Seidel, your colleague, is that is where the action is right now, even though we're looking at the satellite track of this storm, it has it tracking further to the west.
Well, we talk about the dirty side of the storm, and I don't know if we can bring the cameras over. I just want to show you real quickly what we mean by that. The dirty side of the storm is the half of the storm on the right side of the trajectory of the storm. So this storm beginning to work its way up the coast. So, Matt, Savannah, as we take a look at where we're talking about, the area right around Miami Beach, stretching all the way up to Pembroke Pines and Sunrise, they are absorbing all of that violent weather right now. That's the sloppy side of the storm. So you got to watch out for wind, bands of heavy rain, debris. Once again, to let you know where it is, this is a Category 4 storm. It's 15 miles to the southeast of Key West and winds 130 miles an hour right now. So we talked about this pretty much all week. It doesn't matter where you are in the state of Florida, you are going to see some effects of this storm. And I think a lot of folks in sections of southeast Florida breathed a sigh of relief and thought to themselves, well, it's not going to be us. we're seeing what the lighter side of the storm is doing to that section of Florida right now.
Which is a warning for the people on the other side.
Absolutely.
Of the storm. Dave, thanks.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
Dave. We've got Gotti Schwartz with us now. He's driving through southern Florida, headed south, actually. Just left Florida City, so you're headed toward the Keys. Gotti, good morning. What are you seeing? Gotti, can you hear me?
We may have lost the audio feed from Gotti.
Understandable in these conditions that we may be going in and out with our correspondents, of course, and our cameras, because it's tough out there right now. It's happening as we speak.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting for the people over on the west coast of Florida in that Naples, Tampa area where we've got people where Lester and Al are. It's got to be eerie for them because, you know, you wake up this morning and it's really not happening there, although the streets are empty. But knowing that by the middle of this afternoon, things are going to change so dramatically, and they're going to have to be hunkered down like folks in the rest of the state are.
And we see some of the images we saw this morning in Miami, in southeastern Florida. It looks bad, looks awful. We just lost a signal there. This is what we were seeing all morning. And then to say that's the sloppy side of the storm, as Dave Price puts it. That's not even the most intense part of this storm. It's still to come. And so these are tense times and a huge storm.
Dealing with a lot of numbers here. Perhaps the best number we've given all morning long is that 6 million number. 6 million people evacuated from parts of Florida to get out of the path of this storm. And that, in many cases, will save their lives.
That's right. I think we've got Gotti now. Do you hear me, Gotti? Good morning.
Got it.
What are you seeing?
Hey,
I know you're
morning.
going south.
So right now we are heading... Yeah, so we're going south right now. We want to check on the one to see what it's looking like. US 1 is that critical juncture. It takes us into the Florida Keys. And so yesterday we saw the storm surge coming up just a little bit, but it wasn't cresting the road. It was just spraying ocean spray onto it, and it had taken out a couple of fences. So we're about 15, 20 minutes away from there. We're going to check in there. We're actually going to take some videos, some pictures, send them to some emergency crews. There's a lot of people that are wondering what this road looks like at this point, but for right now you're seeing these bands come through here, sustained winds off and on, and they're blowing pretty hard. So back where we were, Florida City, we were starting to see quite a few palm trees down and regular trees down in the road, but for now the road seems passable and seems very clear. Back to you.
All right, Gotti. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lester and Al are in Tampa. They're where this storm is headed. Guys, good morning again.
Good morning, Al. You're just watching Gotti's report.
Yeah, and then I was watching the radar when Dave Price was talking. When you talk about the sloppy side, and we basically, because this storm is so big, if we put the radar up, the northeast quadrant of the storm is the worst part. And because it's so wide, Miami and southeastern Florida is actually in the northeastern quadrant of this storm. They normally wouldn't be feeling this kind of intensity, but as you can see, it's spinning around, and right now it's probably these coordinates, 15 miles southeast of Key West, moving northwest at 8. That was at 7 a.m. We're waiting for the 8 o'clock update, but it's probably, if it hasn't made landfall, it's within a couple of miles of making landfall of Key West. But because it's so big, we are looking at a huge northeastern quadrant, and that basically includes all of southeastern Florida, Lester.
And Matt was mentioning a moment ago, the calm, before the storm. We keep hearing that phrase. But, last night we're looking at a gorgeous sunset in Fort Myers. I've been to so many hurricanes where it's the same thing. You look around, is this real? And then you look at your radar map and you see it coming. And it's easy to get lulled into a false sense of security as you look out. It's a gorgeous day. Why do I need to board up my house? And then you watch some of those images we've seen now as it comes across the Keys.
And as we watch this, we're going to see basically the strong storm. It's going to start to kind of intensify. And in fact, now we just got the 8 o'clock update. It just updated. It is now 20 miles east-southeast of Key West, Florida. So it, in fact, now has passed Key West. So it made landfall, and now it is starting to make its way a little further north. It's moving north-northwest. So now it's starting to straighten up, and it's going to really start to parallel that coast.
It's still on the track that you've been forecasting?
It's been on the track, but now it's going to actually, because it was moving northwest, and if it had continued in that, it would have started to go off into the Gulf. So now it's moving more north and then northwest, and so that's going to start paralleling the Florida coastline.
What's guiding it right now, and is there anything that could push it out into the Gulf?
Nothing. There's nothing right now. Jet stream's up to the north. We don't have any troughs to dig in and push this thing out, so it's going to follow its path, and that path is going to be right along the Florida coastline. It probably won't make another landfall until maybe either Fort Myers or possibly Tampa, depending on how north of northwest this is
traveling.
traveling.
I'm looking at that radar right now, and I'm feeling the rain pelting down again. We're now beginning those outer northern bands.
That's right. The bands, as this thing gets north, now more of the state of Florida is going to get involved. You can see Key West right now. We're going to be looking at that track now starting to push out up to the north.
All right, Matt and Savannah, we're going to send it back to you right now.
Yeah, and I believe, as Al has been mentioning all week long, with it making landfall in Key West, we've now made history with these two back-to-back Category 4 hurricanes to come ashore in the United States. Lester and Al are going to stand by in Tampa. We've got live coverage this morning as Hurricane Irma touches down in the United States and rolls on. We are watching it. Our correspondents are throughout this region, and we're back right after these messages.